Right then guys, here we are for the 18th episode in my Stewart Manager career mode on Grand Prix World. As you can see, last time out in the Australian Grand Prix, Tyrrell scored his first ever Formula 1 points. Now that's a big accomplishment, it certainly is. Fantastic for Tyrrell, but it's also had quite a profound effect on the team as a whole. Well, certainly one of our departments, because in the engineering department, morale has gone up to 2 out of 5. Effort is up to 80%. That is the first time ever in this series that morale has gone up. So that's a big deal, a really big deal, because, well, let me just go into the manufacturing. So it now takes 19%, that's it, only 19% of our staff to manufacture a spare part. Just one race ago, just before the Australian Grand Prix, it took 26%. So that now means we've gone from being able to only manufacture a maximum of 4 spare parts between races, and the 4th one would have cost slightly more. Now we can manufacture 6. 5 realistically. We can manufacture 6 if we desperately wanted to. The 6th one would cost vastly more than the previous 5, but that shows you just how big of a deal morale is, because morale affects effort, and unfortunately morale is still low in the other departments. Well, actually across the board the red X's indicate low morale. Harvey Postlethwaite, the only man with not completely crushingly low morale. I'd rather have improved morale in the design or commercial departments, although it is actually harder to feel or quantify a benefit really. With the engineering department it's actually quite easy, 26 to 19%, that's easy to quantify, but we don't really have massive concerns with manufacturing components. But if the commercial department had a higher morale, or if the design department had higher morale, we could get more design work done in between races. Commercial department, that would mean, we would make more progress in our negotiations, commercial negotiations between races. That would be so helpful, but unfortunately not yet. But the fact one of our departments has gone up in morale means the others, certainly the mechanics and design department, shouldn't be too far behind. Speaking of commercial negotiations, here's where we're at after the Australian Grand Prix. So Ford are only willing to offer us a customer or partner deal. Mercedes the same, although the partner deal would be slightly harder to get and the customer deal would be more expensive. But Peugeot, would you look at that? Peugeot would offer us a works deal. $9.8 million of funding plus engines. However, I've had to think about this, and honestly, I don't think I want to go with them. The Peugeot engine is good, make no mistake. It's actually, I think this season we've got 3 engines which could arguably all be the best. The Ford engine, fantastic in pretty much every aspect apart from reliability. The power is okay, certainly better than some other engines, but the Ford engine is brilliant. The Peugeot engine, really well rounded, no weaknesses at all, although, well, we don't really know truly how good it is because only Prost are running it, and Prost are, well, I don't know what's happened to Prost, I really don't. The Mercedes engine, look at that, maximum power, nearly maximum reliability, and all the other ratings are mediocre. The Peugeot engine could be good next year, but I've got no way of guaranteeing that it will be. But actually, it's not just next year I'd have to worry about, because Peugeot are offering us the deal for 2 years. So the Peugeot engine would have to be good next year and the year after, and I can't guarantee that. Yes, I can't guarantee that the Mercedes or Ford engine would be good either, but Mercedes are the safer bet. Anyway, more to the point, the only reason I desperately wanted a works deal at this moment in time was for the funding, because with that money we no longer need one of our pay drivers. We can get rid, well, normally I would have said Takaki, but Takaki was the quicker driver in Australia, but he does actually pay less money than Diniz. So you might actually have to balance the level of funding versus the level of on-track performance, although I think I'm actually going to keep both of our drivers for hopefully only one more season, although that does mean I'm going to have to constantly offer them a one-season contract, which they might not want. They'll probably want a longer term contract, which is going to be annoying. But anyway, I just don't really want to go with Peugeot engines. Simply put, Mercedes, you know, they are the top engine supplier, and we've struggled for pace in 1998 and 1999. In 1998, Mercedes didn't even want to speak to us. 2 years later, we're running their engines and we scored 3 points. That's why I don't really want to leave them, especially for 2 whole seasons as well. Although, all of this is actually irrelevant if a team sponsor would agree to sponsor us, but Buzz and Hornets, the 2-star team sponsor, don't want to know. That's the annoying thing. So I'm going to, and this is really trying my luck, but I'm going to speak to the 4-star team sponsor because the 3-star team sponsor has already got a contract in place. So I'm going to have to speak to the 4-star team sponsor, Playlife. I really doubt they'll agree to sponsor us because the 2-star team sponsor of Buzz and Hornets have turned us down, so why would a 4-star team sponsor agree to sponsor us? The only reason I'm even trying is because they currently sponsor Sauber. Now Sauber this season have gone downhill. They're on a par with Minardi, which actually isn't as bad as it sounds because Minardi have moved up slightly in the Formula 1 world, but even still Sauber aren't exactly a competitive team. They're not quick enough to warrant a team sponsor. That is after 1 Grand Prix, but the fact of the matter is, team sponsors, also engine suppliers, tyre suppliers, fuel suppliers, it really affects whether a team sponsor agrees to sponsor you or not, and with engine, fuel or tyre suppliers, it affects whether they offer you a works deal or not. Or actually no, because let's not forget in 1998, Mercedes wouldn't even speak to us. Never mind offer us a works deal, so that's the thing, is we've gone up in Mercedes' estimation because they're willing to supply us, but still won't give us a works deal. We still can't attract a team sponsor. Now that's because one of the criteria I believe that suppliers and sponsors go off of is current performance. Now our performance at the moment is fantastic. We finished 4th in the Australian Grand Prix. We're 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, albeit after only 1 race. And that's the thing, after only 1 race. Suppliers and sponsors do factor in your current performance, but what they really do take into consideration is your team's performance historically, and that's the thing, because in 1998, when I first took charge of the team, we scored 3 points. In 1999, last season, we scored no points at all. Seemingly, the fact we've already scored the same number of points as we did in the whole of 1998 isn't enough for these team sponsors. We're still too big of a gamble, and fair enough. The Australian Grand Prix could have been a flash in the pan, it could have been a one-off, but we're still quicker than we were previously, and I'm fairly certain we're quick enough for a team sponsor, even if not necessarily this one, but I'm trying my luck because, well, I really want the money. And because it's looking incredibly unlikely that a team sponsor is willing to sponsor us, I don't really have much of a choice other than to keep Diniz and Takaki, but looking at the drivers which are available to sign, that isn't actually that bad because, well, we've got all of the non-F1 drivers we can speak to, but why would I want to? Even Pierre Rainbow. Why would I desperately want him? How much does he pay actually? 5.8 million, so that's less than Diniz and Takaki. Anyway, the drivers which are available to sign for next season are Laurent Redon. Don't really want him, he doesn't really have the driver stats to be honest. Jean Alesi, certainly a driver to consider, very good driver ratings, but unfortunately his salary is very expensive, $8 million, and we'd have to up that. That's more expensive than I thought, so Alesi, I really just can't justify the cost. Ricardo Zonta, same with Laurent Redon, I don't really want him. Now Barrichello is actually a very sensible driver to go for because he is probably the best value for money driver in the game, $4.3 million salary. We could afford that, certainly if we went with the Peugeot Works deal we easily could. And of course Barrichello, his driver stats are fantastic, but the only reason I'm not going to sign Barrichello is because, well, in this game you can sign any driver for any team, and it would kind of seem a bit not fully utilising the potential of the game to re-sign a former Stewart driver. You know, it would just be a bit of a boring move, so I'm going to turn down Barrichello, but to be honest, he is the only driver worth getting, to be honest, because, well, I wouldn't want Jörg Müller. Jarno Trulli, an interesting one, 1.5 million salary. Unfortunately, his driver stats are awful. Actually, probably even pale in comparison to Takaki's. Actually, let's get up Takaki because realistically, he is the driver I would consider getting rid of. So, Jarno Trulli, his performance stats are actually slightly better. I think slightly better than Takaki's, but that's the thing. Trulli, we'd have to pay him $1.5 million. Takaki pays us $6.4 million. Why would I give up $8 million, just over $8 million for someone who is slightly better? You can't square the price difference. On the face of it, Jacques Villeneuve might seem like quite a good driver to get because he is very highly skilled, no doubt about it, and he is a test driver with Prost, so you would assume that his salary demands wouldn't be that high because he would be desperate to get into a race seat, but $14.5 million, that is a hell of a lot for a driver which in Grand Prix Manager 2 was very cheap actually, incredibly cheap, although I guess compared to when Grand Prix Manager 2 came out and Grand Prix World came out, Jacques Villeneuve went from being a rookie to a world champion, so I guess that's what makes a difference. Emmanuel Collard, very, very good actually in previous seasons, although his driver stats are awful. Montoya would be an interesting driver to get, but let's not forget this is a game made in 1998, so this is Montoya with very low stats. And also again, you know, same would apply, we'd have to give up Takaki's income. Mika Salo, much like with Jarno Trulli actually, what is his salary? 2.3 million, so actually more expensive than Jarno Trulli, and has arguably worse stats. And that's it. Those are the only drivers I can speak to for next season. The only drivers worth considering in terms of a skill level perspective are Barrichello, Villeneuve, and Alesi. Alesi's way too expensive. Actually, I think Alesi's salary demands are pretty high considering. Although, to be fair, Alesi did have a good season last season. Jacques Villeneuve, way out of this team's price range. Barrichello is the only driver I can vaguely consider, but it would just be a boring move. Especially as next season, Alex Wurz, he'll be free. Well, he won't be free next season, but he will be available to speak to, as will Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Michael Schumacher, although we won't be able to afford him. Ralf Schumacher, actually, Ralf Schumacher's driving stats are pretty good. His salary, 3.6 million. Right, actually, on balance, he might be as good value for money as Barrichello, quite possibly. So certainly a driver to consider. Eddie Irvine as well will be available to speak to, as will Damon Hill, although I dare say his salary demands are actually not quite as bad as I would have thought, but point still stands. Ricardo Rosset, Johnny Herbert, $3.9 million salary, definitely one to consider because, although actually his driver stats aren't quite as good as I would have thought. And then you've got Olivier Panis. In fact, Panis, another driver to definitely consider. $2.2 million salary, decent driver stats. and I'm assuming that is pretty much everyone. There you go. So those are all the drivers that I'll be able to speak to next season. So that's the thing. There's no real drivers that are worth getting, bar Barrichello, that are available this season. So based on the lack of a works engine offer from Mercedes and Ford, and based on the fact we're probably not going to get a team sponsor, it just makes sense to renew Takaki's and Deniz's contracts, although only for one season, which I feel may be problematic, but I'm certainly going to try it. The first race of the season, the Australian Grand Prix, was fantastic for us. 4th place with Tour Takaki, and with literally just about enough money to travel to Brazil, let's do exactly that. Well, I have to say, after our 4th place finish in Australia, I'm actually slightly disappointed by the qualifying results, but let's not forget it was, I believe, similar to this for the Australian Grand Prix, but so many drivers retired during the race that our position was elevated. Yet again though, Toru Takaki has beaten Pedro Diniz. There's only 0.3 of a second separating them, but ultimately it's the difference between 8th and 13th place. Toru Takaki is still the fastest Goodyear runner, with Michael Schumacher on pole position, the only driver to, albeit only just about, dip into the 1-minute 16s. David Coulthard has qualified in 2nd, splitting the 2 Ferrari drivers, with Esteban Tyrrell, the Williams driver, in 4th place. Heinz-Harald Frentzen in 5th, he took pole position in the Australian Grand Prix, but much slower here, down in 5th. He did, however, beat the podium finisher of Johnny Herbert. Then it's Moreira in 7th place. Then Takaki, Mika Salo, Eddie Irvine, Damon Hill in the McLaren, all the way down in 11th. Then it's Jean Alesi, Pedro Diniz, Montoya, Jarno Trulli, Nakano. So yes, yet again another bad qualifying performance for Sauber. Yep, there you go, there is Emmanuel Collard. And I was singing the praises of Emmanuel Collard, but well, to be fair, he doesn't exactly have the car to be competitive, but he did still qualify behind his teammate. Then you've got both Arrows drivers, then both Prost drivers. I don't get it. I don't understand, because Prost shouldn't be this slow. I mean, it's not just a case of they shouldn't be the slowest team, but they shouldn't even be this much the slowest team. Every other team, at worst, is in the 1-minute 19s, and actually, only Arrows are in the 1-minute 19s. Every other team is in the 1-minute 18s or 17s, with Michael Schumacher just about in the 1-minute 16s, but Prost are firmly in the 1-minute 20s. One of their drivers is Mika Hakkinen. They should have an 80% rated chassis. Their chassis should be the joint best one on the grid, tied with Benetton. And if Moreira can qualify in 7th, then there is no reason why Marini shouldn't be able to do that, and why Hakkinen shouldn't be able to qualify in the top 6. But he's down in 21st, Marini in 22nd. Arrows are equally confusing, because Arrows are over half a second behind the next slowest driver, and Arrows are fundamentally the same team with minor changes to last season. And that's the thing is, Arrows were a strange team last season, because although it's very difficult to quantify a lap time improvement to each upgrade, each improvement the team made, but although it's very difficult to do that, by my reckoning, I don't think Arrows should have been as quick as they were last season, but they were. By that same measure, they shouldn't be this slow this year, because they were quick last year. There's no reason they should be slow this year, but also very little has changed. I don't get it. It's almost like Arrows borrowed pace from this year for last year, because they shouldn't have been as quick as they were last season, I don't think. They certainly, indisputably, shouldn't be this slow this season, but they are. Arrows are a really confusing one, so are Prost. I don't understand how they've got it so wrong. So a very dry qualifying session will be followed up by a dry race. And actually, I'm looking forward to races for the first time since the end of 1998 because we're actually quick. We've got pace. I think we are the 4th quickest team. I mean, that is disputable because Diniz really isn't delivering, strangely, in qualifying compared to his teammate, but the thing that makes the races exciting is we've got reliability on our side, certainly with engines, and actually most of our technology parts are reasonably reliable. All of them, bar one, have at least 3 out of 5 reliability, and the one which isn't, I'm currently improving. So we're not only quick, we're also reliable, so hopefully that can bring us a decent result. Just some points. I'd be happy with a point. We got lucky in Australia, hopefully we'll get lucky here in Brazil. So, well, I said I'd be happy with a point, and that is exactly what we've got. 6th and 7th. We've beaten Moreira in the Benetton, and Benetton have the joint best chassis on the grid, although in real terms it probably is the best chassis on the grid. Michael Schumacher has won the 2nd race in a row, beating David Coulthard, who finished in 2nd, and Giancarlo Fisichella rounds off the podium places. Heinz-Harald Frentzen has finished in 4th place, which I can't help but feel disappointed about because the Benetton chassis is the best one on the grid, and it actually trounces the Ferrari or McLaren chassis because the Benetton chassis should be rated 80%, the McLaren and Ferrari chassis both should be rated 40%. And we saw how quick Frentzen was in qualifying at Albert Park, and yet here he finished in 4th place. However, that is still an improvement from where he qualified. Damon Hill finished in 5th, beating both of our drivers. Pedro Diniz beating his teammate this time around, so that's good for Diniz's confidence and also, I would say, job security if both of them weren't, well, as far as I'm concerned, renewed for next season. Actually, Takaki, just a quick bit of news, Takaki has already accepted a 1-season long contract. Diniz turned it down. He thought the contract was too short. So Takaki will definitely be with us next season. Diniz, I'm still trying, but I'm just worried he might join another team. I don't see why he would because we're on the up, but I don't know. I really don't. Anyway, hopefully, now that he scored a point, he'll be willing to join us for one more season. Anyway, Moreira finished down in 8th, which is, I guess, confidence inspiring for us because you wouldn't exactly say Takaki or Diniz are amazing drivers, but Moreira certainly worse, but in the much better car, yet we beat him. Fantastic stuff. Montoya in 9th, Eddie Irvine in 10th, and in fact actually I think the other Tyrrell driver of Mika Salo retired, which is a shame actually because Tyrrell were really good in the Australian Grand Prix. They had both of their drivers finish, and in fact finished 5th and 6th. They scored 3 points, the same amount as us. So that means we're now definitely ahead of Tyrrell in the Constructors' Championship. And is there anything else at the bottom? Well, Prost had one driver retire, and Hakkinen did finish, but 4 laps down. 4 laps! Jan Magnussen did actually beat Ricardo Rosset in the Minardi, which I guess is some form of achievement. For the first time ever in this series, both of our drivers appear classified in the Drivers' Championship. Tora Takaki is still joint 5th. He's tied on points with Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Pedro Diniz joined 9th with Juan Pablo Montoya, but just seeing both of our drivers officially listed in the Drivers' Championship is a massive step forward, and 4 points in total for the team, which is fantastic. Michael Schumacher, massive early lead in the Drivers' Championship. In the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari are dominating already. We've only done 2 races this season, yet Ferrari have got 30 points. In 2nd place is McLaren, who have 8 points. 8 points. That's just over a quarter of Ferrari's points. We've only done 2 races. Williams are joint 3rd with us, and Benetton joint 5th with Tyrrell. So actually, that is an incredibly strange looking Constructors' Championship. Not too surprisingly, we've hit a brick wall with Play Life. No deal. That's all they say, no deal. I'm not going to speak to any other team sponsor because it would just be pointless, but that is disappointing. Honestly, I thought we might have done it. A decent Australian Grand Prix, a fairly good Brazilian Grand Prix. We scored points in both races. Both of our drivers have scored points. We had both of our drivers finish the Brazilian Grand Prix, which I'm not sure if that really affects things. I think it might actually. I think possibly. I'm not sure. Either way, Play Life, don't want to know. I'm not massively surprised. It's a good thing then I've signed Pedro Diniz. That's right, Pedro Diniz has accepted his 1 season long contract, so we're going to have the exact same driver lineup for next season. Pedro Diniz, Tora Takaki, and even John Fellows. He'll still be with us as the test driver. Speaking of which, we actually still don't have a testing car manufactured for John Fellows because, well, you can see in the top right corner we are making money, but not by the barrel load like we were at the end of last season. With slightly more money in hand, although in Formula 1 terms this is loose change. Anyway, with slightly more money in hand and crucially just enough to travel to Argentina, let's go there and see if this can be the 3rd point scoring race for the team on the bounce. Yet another dry qualifying session, so let's see how well we do in Argentina. I'm imagining another 8th place qualifying performance. Quickest Goodyear runner, that's what I'm expecting. No, better than that actually. 6th place for Pedro Diniz. Finally, he's got back into his groove. Takaki slightly lower down. That is a bit disappointing, I have to say, although both Williams drivers got their act together. Johnny Herbert qualified in 4th and Esteban Tuero in 5th. So that explains why Takaki qualified 2 places lower down than where I expected him to finish, but Takaki is still the 2nd quickest Goodyear runner, and Pedro Diniz, who qualified in 6th, is quicker than some Bridgestone runners, which in of itself isn't that big of a deal, but those Bridgestone runners include Moreira in the Benetton, and both McLaren drivers, David Coulthard in 8th and Damon Hill in 9th. Down at the bottom of the grid, it's business as usual for the ugly duckling of Bridgestone teams, as Prost yet again have qualified in 21st and 22nd places. Although Hakkinen did qualify much closer in terms of lap time to an Arrows driver, but that's less of an achievement for Hakkinen and more of a poor qualifying performance for Jan Magnussen, because Magnussen qualified 0.8 of a second behind his teammate, and his teammate is still nearly a second behind the next slowest driver, which is Shinji Nakano. And actually, in the bottom half of the grid, it's much like Noah's Ark, because you've got both Tyrrells, then both Jordans, then both Minardis, then Saubers, then Arrows, then Prost. So it's actually quite nicely sorted down the bottom half of the grid. The conditions have changed from dry to overcast, but that's still dry. It doesn't really matter to a point what's going on in the sky, it matters what's going on the ground, and if there's no moisture, it's still dry. Anyway, let's head on into the race. So, I'm quite excited. Hopefully, this can be more like the Australian Grand Prix with a whole host of retirements. Pedro Diniz is getting better with every single race. He qualified in 6th. So even if we make up no places from where we qualify, we'll still score a point. Although, both of our drivers did retire, so there were a number of retirements in this race. Unfortunately, they included both of our drivers. Michael Schumacher out with an engine failure. Now that's quite a shock because Ferrari are running Mercedes engines, the same ones we're running, and the Mercedes engine is the most reliable one on the grid. Yet it failed for Michael Schumacher. What are the odds of that? A reliable Mercedes engine in a Ferrari driven by Michael Schumacher. What are the odds the engine would blow up? Yet it did. Tora Takaki out due to an unknown issue, which is not helpful at all because we don't know what to change, or even if it is something we can change, so that's really not helpful. Eddie Irvine out due to an accident, Damon Hill in the McLaren out due to a clutch issue, and Johnny Herbert, the first driver to retire, and that was an accident. Due in no small part to all the retirements, Benetton had a 1-2 finish. Heinz-Harald Frentzen won the 2000 Argentine Grand Prix with his teammate Moreira in second place. That's fantastic for Moreira because in Australia he wasn't exactly amazing. In qualifying he was, but he was running in 7th place before he retired, and I think on the fastest lap chart for Australia he set the 7th fastest lap, or was the 7th fastest driver. Here though, second place, fantastic, in only his second Formula 1 race. Esteban Tyrrell, the former Minardi driver, now driving for Williams, finished in 3rd place, 7 seconds behind Moreira. Actually, that's a point. Moreira was 46 seconds behind his teammate. With both of our drivers out of the way, both Tyrrell drivers scored points. Mika Salo finished in 4th, Juan Pablo Montoya in 5th, and Jean Alesi in 6th. Actually, this is very much like the Australian Grand Prix. Just replace Ferrari with Benetton and with Takaki retiring. Apart from that, it is very similar to the Australian Grand Prix. Yes, because both Sauber drivers finished again, and both Arrows drivers again. Yeah, it's actually very similar to the Australian Grand Prix. The only difference is that Takaki retired, and it's a different Italian team on top. The Argentine Grand Prix has had quite a big effect on the Drivers' Championship because Heinz-Harald Frentzen has overtaken Giancarlo Fisichella. Frentzen is now 2nd in the Drivers' Championship, only 7 points behind Michael Schumacher. David Coulthard is tied on points with Moreira. Celso Moreira, who a few weeks ago had never driven a Formula 1 car, now he's tied on points with David Coulthard. Salo is 6th in the standings with Johnny Herbert and Esteban Tyrrell, the two Williams drivers, tied on points, 4 points each, joint 7th in the Drivers' Championship. Then you've got Montoya and Takaki joint 9th in the Drivers' Championship with 3 points each. They're both ahead of Damon Hill. Well, we've fallen down a hell of a long way in the Constructors' Championship just in this episode, 3rd to 6th. However, we should be able to beat Tyrrell. We are quicker than Tyrrell on raw pace, but it's going to come down to taking opportunities, reliability, all of that. Tyrrell, credit to them, Tyrrell are joint 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. They're joint 3rd with Williams and McLaren. So that's everything for this episode, and as you can see, morale is still chronically low across the board, although I don't really fully understand why. Certainly with our drivers, because Diniz and Takaki, they've both scored points, 12th and 9th in the Drivers' Championship, joint 12th and joint 9th, but why is their morale still low? I know Takaki was annoyed after the Brazilian Grand Prix, but really? I know both of our drivers didn't finish the Argentine Grand Prix, but surely they must be motivated. They've got a new contract with the team for next season. The team's on the up. They've both scored points. We're plainly quick. We didn't even score those points through a fluke. You know, we're actually genuinely, I think, the 4th quickest team, so I don't really see why they're annoyed. Anyway, I hope you guys did enjoy this episode. If you did, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode where we start the European leg of the season with the 2000 San Marino Grand Prix.